For our inaugural session today, we're diving straight into Scaling Up AI, dispatches from the front lines of the AI revolution. Guiding us through is the remarkable and visionary Lila Tretikov from Microsoft and Praveen Akkaraju from Insight Partners.
Right. All right. Well, welcome, Lila.
Thank you.
Really excited to kick off Scale Up AI with this conversation. So, Microsoft has been sort of the middle of this revolution in many ways, right? This particular sort of moment that we have with AI. And it's hard to believe that it's just been less than a year since ChatGPT kicked off. But obviously, AI has been happening for a long time. I thought I'd start off just to get a perspective from you in terms of how, given that you've been a researcher, you've been involved with AI for a long time, where are we today from a state of AI perspective, right? You have a broad view at Microsoft, both in terms of consumers, in terms of businesses and such like. Maybe let's kick it off with that.
Yeah, it feels like an explosion this year, but it was long in the making. I came to Microsoft to take AI initially out of the lab. This is, circa 2018, and before that, Microsoft had been working on AI for decades and decades. And we all know it's like AI has been, around as a concept for the last 50 years. So it's not actually as sudden as people feel it is. But what was sudden is this recognition that these larger models, the transformers, specifically transformer architecture models, are so capable that they can pass, the exams. They can really feel like, we talk about AGI, but like we actually start moving up the polls on what AGI is, because at this point we're passing the Turing test, right? So it really feels like you are no longer talking to the machine. So this year has been really explosive, and what I think everybody has seen is this velocity that AI enables. So when we talk about how much of a step change AI really brings, you really literally see it in Microsoft's velocity.
Right.
Because we've shipped Copilot after Copilot, literally weeks apart, and then within that we iterate constantly. So the momentum is phenomenal, but it's not just because Microsoft is so great, which it is, but it is because we have this new incredible tool at our disposal. It's imagine as if you were to jump from, for those of you who remember, punch cards, right, all the way to higher programming languages,
right,
in a matter of a year. And this is what we're seeing. And what is really interesting is we're seeing this with our customers. It's not just Microsoft that's enabled to do this, but because we're making these models available to all of our customers, we're seeing them do this, and we're seeing them do it on our own, on their own. Examples would be, we have some, open source orchestrators in place, that people just literally download off of GitHub and start using, and 2 weeks later, and we're talking about, S&P 100 companies, 2 weeks later they have it in production. So these cycles are accelerating, and they're not just about these special companies that are already in the tech industry. These are companies that are not technology companies,
right,
but enabled by
on that point. It's an interesting one because it feels different this time somehow, right? In the terms of the pace of adoption.
Yep.
Maybe given again your vantage point, what's different about this particular cycle of AI, if you will?
Well, I think it's accessible for the first time. For the last how long? The history of computers, we had to all speak machine, right? We had to learn machine language. Even if you look at your phones, right? You have to learn the interface. This is the first time that you have to learn nothing. You are speaking to the machine in human language and responds in human language, which makes the barrier just drop to ground zero, and diffusion of innovation all of a sudden just goes, into hyperdrive. So no matter where you are in the world, the computer now speaks your language, right? It's not just English.
Yeah, I think there was a saying that now, English is the new programming language.
That's right. That's right. Andrew said that. Andrew Karpathy said that, and it's absolutely true, right? And in fact, people really focus right now on the copilots, which I think we should talk about that because I think that's basically the next interface. We've been looking for this interface, trying to get it to work for the last 10, 15 years. You've seen multiple companies trying to do these assistants, and now it's finally here. We're realizing it. But there's another point here. So for those of you who are in large companies, it's actually AI is incredibly valuable to your infrastructure. Because just maintaining, back-end infrastructure, API to API communications, as an example, AI is fantastic for that because it's really good at coding. So if you need to maintain, a bunch of back-end services, this generative model is rocking it. So it's applicable in all different directions.
So maybe one more sort of broader question. Do you feel like we're at sort of a steady state from a technology perspective in terms of models and such, like where the industry can start building? Or do you think there's more math that's coming that's going to
that's a great question. So when you started talking, you probably saw it on my face, like steady state. No, we're kind of in the first inning here. These models are going to get more capable. They're going to get better.
Yeah.
But you can still count on them to be stable in the sense that you can utilize them as they are right now. You're going to get a ton of value out of them as they are right now. And as they get better, you're just going to start getting more and more value, right? You don't need to change anything. You don't need to upgrade anything. They're just going to, their reasoning capabilities are going to get better and better and better over time.
Right. Yeah, it feels like there's going to be a GPT-5 and a 6 and eventually a 10.
Think about it. It's like I think of models as a new CPU, right? It's sort of your new processor. Right, and you can keep upgrading the processor, but nothing in the middle really changes,
right?
And your computer will get better if you keep upgrading it, right? And the same thing here, your application is going to get better as your model upgrades. So like even today, you can use GPT-4, you can use GPT 3.5 on top of Azure. GPT-4 is better, but you don't always need it.
Yeah, and it also feels like there's the opportunity to be able to combine multiple models, right? Different models 100%. As you're building your application.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And we'll talk a little bit about Microsoft. So you talked about sort of the Copilot as a construct, and I think it's clearly kind of broken out in this phase of AI as sort of the the mental model, if you will, for how AI can be leveraged.
Yep.
Maybe let's talk a little bit about that from your vantage point. Again, Microsoft sort of you have a security copilot, you have a cloud copilot, you have a application copilot. So as you said, you've been releasing these copilots. Maybe let's spend a little bit of time just articulating that concept of a copilot and how that sort of plays into the broader engagement of businesses or society with AI.
Yeah, so I think we are sort of at the front end of this next wave of user experience changes, right? And I think this is the representation of that. Now, we all have different jobs and we have different lives, and then within our lives, we have a bunch of different specializations that we need to understand and do. And in each one of those, you kind of needed an advisor, right? So today, if you want to understand something or learn something, you go and you read a bunch of documents, you do a bunch of searches, a lot of manual work. With the Copilot, you have an instant advisor who can teach you, explain things to you, you can kind of brainstorm with, you can actually use it as a verifier of your own thought process, right? So this is, think of it as it's not even an assistant, it's a partner in your work, right? A partner who has different capabilities, not unlike your own. He can really help you in your job. And depends on what your job is, there are different specializations for these. And this is why we expect that people are going to be building copilots for everything, right?
Yeah.
Microsoft it's not our job to build a bunch of different verticals. We play at the application layer, we play in certain areas, and that's where we're building those copilots. But there are going to be a lot of specialized ones. And then, over time, I think you are going to have your own copilot that's tuned into you, because AI can actually start learning your own patterns, your own history, your own interests, and be hyper-personalized, and then invoke whatever copilot you need. So, if tomorrow you need a copilot for your doctor's appointment, or to explain to you what your doctor just wrote in the documents, which is not easy. I don't know how good your medical jargon is. Mine is not. You can invoke the medical copilot, but if you're doing, let's say, financial, trying to understand your financial portfolio, you have a completely different one.
Yeah.
So, and that's
Yeah.
how we're seeing.
So maybe we dig into a little bit of sort of Microsoft strategy here. As you were saying, I think Microsoft's been working on AI for a long time. It just feels like there's this sort of rolling thunder of announcements coming out of Microsoft. So maybe we could start with sort of partnerships. You have a pretty broad set of partnerships that Microsoft's leveraged. So how do those come about, like with OpenAI? And you're straddling both the proprietary models as well as open source models. So how do you think about sort of partnership in the context of the Microsoft portfolio products?
I think Satya said at some point that the Microsoft fundamentally is a platform company. And what that means is that the platform is only successful if the value generated by companies building on top of the platform vastly exceeds the value that the platform itself generates. I think that's very, very telling. This is why I really love working there, is because it's all about people who are building on top of this platform layer that we're building. So we believe that AI is going to be extremely transformative. I think we're already seeing that. What that's going to do is going to really change all of the infrastructure, everything down to the power we use, the networking we use, and Microsoft is really paying a lot of attention there. Right, so that's the platform component, and then on top of that, we'll provide some tooling on top of this, from developer tools to business tools, just like we have done for a long, long time. And you see that expressed in the Copilots.
Right, and from a strategy perspective, what's the clearly Azure is the platform that Microsoft's kind of anchoring all of the AI push around. So how does that come together? But at the same time, you have like a security strategy, an application strategy, right, a cloud strategy, developer strategy, and such like. So what does that product architecture look like?
So we partner, of course, at the infrastructure layer. As you know, we have a big partnership with OpenAI, and we really believe that innovation comes from everywhere, and it comes from outside of our walls more than it comes from inside of our walls. So we partner at every layer in the stack, right? We bring in other models. We bring in different databases. We have Azure Arc, which is connecting, allows you to interconnect to other clouds, right? It's a very open ecosystem. On top of that, there are products that are more specific. So like you mentioned, security, communication with Teams, they are actually platforming products as well. So you can build plugins within Teams. You basically can put your application in that. And then each copilots are extensible, right? So you can build plugins for them. So if you want your copilot to talk to your enterprise data stack, or you want them to connect to have API connections basically to other software that you're using, you can do that. So every single piece, even if it's an end-user product, it is still a platform.
So will there be a copilot of copilots if you have all these copilots?
There's a Microsoft Copilot.
Right. So that'll orchestrate like the security and your infrastructure and.
It's more sort of natural than that. It happens naturally, right? So if you are, let's say, in Windows, the Windows Copilot, you could connect it. You should be able to connect it to other copilots as you see fit.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense.
So think of it as talking to a different specialist. So you can tell, hey, my copilot, I need some help on my security, or bring me coffee.
Yeah. Sounds good. How do you think about sort of the competitive landscape, if you will? Do you think that, in the cloud space, we have 3 dominant cloud providers today. Do you think AI sort of becomes that way? You have like a couple of massive models and everybody kind of builds on them, or how do you see that evolving?
So I think one thing that's really important to understand, I think we're still going through that change. I see this shift happening with customers. People still want to build a lot of our customers still ask me, should we be building our own models? And to me, the answer is obvious. Like that is not necessary anymore. Don't waste your time unless you have some really, really specialized use case. And even then, you probably want to fine tune. We actually went through that internally, because we have so many researchers who used to be building all of this stuff, and all of a sudden, overnight, the paradigm has shifted. So I think we're going to have several sort of base class foundational models. The reason there aren't going to be that many is because it requires so much compute and so much power, right? The supercomputers are required to run
large
this.
data centers.
Yes, there are large data centers that are required to run these like really, really smart models. Doesn't mean that there's going to be a proliferation of smaller ones that run on the edge. I think there's going to be a very vibrant ecosystem out there, but I think for these very, very high-powered, high-performance ones, you're going to see the...
Yeah. So then we come to the really important question. Like when we talk to a lot of practitioners who are actually implementing AI, one of the top concerns really is around how do we think about data privacy, right? Clearly, Microsoft got an amazing platform, lots of tools. There's a lot of open questions around the models, the explainability of these models, the privacy of the data that's used to train these models, and that's even before we talk about regulation and such like, which we'll come to. But how do you approach that and assure customers that when they're building on Microsoft's infrastructure with all these models that they're doing in a privacy-preserving way?
We've been thinking about this from the very beginning. I think back in 2017, I published an article, that we should, I think it was called, the title was, we should raise AI like children, or it will turn into terrible toddlers. The idea that, from the first principles, we need to be thinking of security, privacy, safety, was always sort of built into our DNA. And in 2018, I think we published our ethical AI principles, responsible AI principles. And from there on, they got completely embedded into the fabric of how Microsoft does business. So every AI feature, now I'll give you an example. Like, this is back in the day, right? I was responsible, one of the products in my portfolio was AI features for Teams. And we wanted to publish translation, transcription, all of that. And we did a ton of testing, and we realized that if you turn on transcription without creating a lot of scaffolding and explanation around that, creates silencing effect, especially for minority people in a room. So we didn't ship it until we could remedy that problem, right? So every AI feature goes through an ethical AI review this is Microsoft-wide. So when we first saw this latest really powerful GPT-4 model, we actually didn't let anybody touch it except for our ethics team, for our red team. And they spent 2 months basically trying to break it, trying to understand all of the things that can go wrong with it, all of the privacy leaks that could potentially occur, et cetera. We did not allow ourselves to ship it until we were confident that this realization of the product was safe, was up to the same standards as we've always had.
So if I'm an enterprise, I'm looking to build on Microsoft, I can be assured that my data is preserved,
Absolutely.
right? And it's not going to leak to the models.
If you're using Microsoft Bing for enterprise, it actually says there.
Okay.
And because we kept getting this asks, right? It says there, this data we will never see your data, basically. And this is exactly how we treat the data. We have been treating enterprise data for the last, since the beginning, right? We are not allowed to see data of our customers, and it's the same for AI, no different. On top of that, because the models are built on, on public data, or also basically take all of the risk. So if there's any problem, Microsoft takes the risk of.
Yeah, makes sense.
Model itself.
You were the CEO of Wikipedia, so you had sort of a unique perspective in terms of, how the community information and data is preserved. There's a lot of push towards regulation in AI right now. Microsoft's a global corporation. One of the concerns that a lot of practitioners have is when they're building an AI solution, will they have to deal with like multiple different regulations in terms of how it's actually implemented? How's Microsoft approaching this, both in terms of your work with different governments as well as sort of your advocacy on this?
Yeah, so we're actually very supportive of thoughtful regulation. And as we published a document that basically sort of outlines how we internally think about this, and sort of the guidance that we give ourselves, but also how we would support regulators in their work. And we do a lot of sort of communication and creating transparency of how these things are built and what are they founded on to help people understand so that they can regulate this effectively. I think we're at a point in time where good regulation will create a lot of clarity and it will actually help us to move faster, help people to feel safer around this. But of course, regulation could be challenging if we don't want it to create unnecessary bottlenecks so that it stifles innovation.
Yeah. So we're almost at the end of time here, but I have to ask the question: is AI going to be the death of humanity, as you hear if you're watching 60 Minutes or any of the popular popular sort of media today, or is it something that mankind can control and it's the next electricity and moves us forward?
Yeah, you asked me, when we're walking in, and I always say, like, look, if I give you a hammer, right, you can use it to build a house, or you can use it for something really bad and really hurt somebody, right? This is another hammer.
But the hammer is thinking this time, so that's the problem.
Look, I think thinking is a little bit of a stretch, right? This is now actually AI is helping us understand a little bit our own biology as well, and I think it will really help us solve some of the really, really unsolved problems. So I think it's very powerful. I think it's completely up to us how we deploy it, right? I think we need to have very concrete rules around what is allowed and what is not, and really go after bad actors, just in the same exact way as we do it with everything else. So again, agreements, regulations, and then obviously actually action at the end of that. But the amazing stuff that we just unlocked. So for the longest time in science, and I want to leave you with this. For the longest time in science, the way that we did science, right, is we would create a hypothesis and then we would try to get a formula to prove or disprove the hypothesis that we've created. It's very, very difficult to do, right? We would go all the way back to mathematical first principles. Once the complexity increases in the chaotic system, it's impossible to find these things. So just our human mind cannot figure it out, cannot comprehend this. For the first time in our existence, we have a technology that allows us to effectively reverse engineer. We can ask it a question that's basically at the end, right? Basically, here's the goal. Explain to me, how do you achieve this goal? I want this molecule. Reverse engineer for me how this molecule could be created. That's just one example. So now if you start applying this to the unsolved problems of the universe, including our own body, our health, our physiology, our minds, the cosmos, right? the things that are opening up are incredible. But understanding those things, knowing things, of course, is dangerous.
Yeah.
Because in the wrong hands, somebody can do a lot of harm. But I believe in humanity. I hope we, as always, get through this and awesome. Rise to the challenge.
Well, that's a great way to end this session. Thank you, Laila. Appreciate the wisdom and the conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laila and Praveen.